Okay, so picture this with me. A city founded by a bunch of merchants. Like, these guys were so independent, they basically told their ruler, we're selling what we want, end of story.
You really can't overstate that independent streak. It's woven into the very fabric of Berlin.
Totally. And that's what makes it so fascinating to really dig into. So forget about dusty textbooks and boring dates. Today, we're diving deep into Berlin's past, and trust me, this is one history lesson you won't want to sleep through.
Absolutely. We're talking surprising twists, ironic turns, the moments that make Berlin unlike any other capital in the world. Get ready to see how a city built on, get this, swampland became a stage for emperors, revolutionaries, rock stars, you name it.
And we're going way back to do it. I'm talking way back. The Wikipedia article kicks off not with, like, palaces and parliaments, but with Ice Age valleys. Turns out, the very first Berliners, they set up shop in a spot you'd never expect.
Yeah, if you're thinking what we think you're thinking about where those first settlements were, you're probably right.
Right. It just goes to show you how long people have been drawn to this place, even tens of thousands of years ago, and it's a totally different landscape.
Yeah.
But buckle up because it doesn't stay quiet for long. You've got these peaceful farming communities who just up and leave.
Yeah.
The area is practically deserted.
Yeah.
And then, boom, the Slavs show up.
Yeah.
And they are all about those fortified towns.
And that's where we meet the OG rivals, right? Spandau and Köpenick, that early back and forth, that constant vying for power. It really sets the stage for Berlin as we know it.
But here's where it gets juicy. Historians still go back and forth, trying to figure out who came first, Berlin or Cologne.
It's like the ultimate history mystery. Which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Right. I mean, we know they shared institutions, but those two settlements, they were constantly at each other's throats.
Talk about a rivalry for the ages. And just to make things even more interesting, enter the Wittelsbachs. Now, remember that independent spirit we talked about? Yeah, it didn't exactly fly with the new guys in town. There's a whole dramatic story about a priest, right? Let's just say he found himself on the wrong side of the locals, and it did not end well.
Oof, yeah. Not well at all. That clash, tragic as it was, it really highlights the tension simmering beneath the surface in Berlin, this refusal to be controlled. It's like the defining characteristic of the city.
For sure. And that defiance is about to get cranked up to 11 under the Hohenzollerns, who, by the way, held on to power for centuries. But even they weren't immune to the whole Berlin pushes back thing. They dealt with the Berliner Unwillen uprising, which is basically the people revolting against their own rulers. Talk about making a statement.
These Berliners were not messing around. They were not afraid to make their voices heard, even if it meant facing down a king. And then, just to keep things interesting, boom, the Reformation.
And this is where things take an interesting turn, because while the rest of Europe is busy debating theology, Berlin sees an opportunity.
Right, forget religion. This is about power. Land grabs. Who's got the money for these massive building projects, like that superimposing Spandau Citadel, which, by the way, is still standing today? Talk about a power move.
It just goes to show you that the same event can play out in totally different ways depending on where you are. In Berlin, the Reformation wasn't just some religious upheaval. It was a chance to reshape the city, literally.
And then, of course, you got the 30 Years' War. It decimates the population, right?
Yeah.
Enter the great elector, known for being, well, tolerant, and he basically throws open the city gates, and it's just like, come on in, everybody.
Well, he needed people, let's be real. The war was devastating, and rebuilding a city, especially a city with ambitions as big as Berlin's, that takes manpower.
For sure. So, yeah, it was good intentions, but also brilliant strategy. And among the folks who answered the call, the French Huguenots, they ended up making up a huge chunk, like 20% of the city's population by 1700.
Oh, yeah, and their impact still felt today. You know how Berlin is famous for its incredible pastries?
Oh, yeah.
Thank the Huguenots. They brought their baking A game. It's this perfect example of how Berlin, even with its strong German identity, has always been shaped by the waves of people who've called it home. And all of that leads us to a pretty pivotal year, 1701. Berlin, this city that was, let's be honest, cobbled together from different towns and villages, fueled by all these newcomers, it officially becomes a capital city.
But, and this is a big but, it's not like it was planned that way. You know, it wasn't this meticulously designed capital from the get-go. Imagine it. 5 separate towns, each with their own thing going on, their own personalities. Suddenly they're told to act like one big happy city.
Yeah, someone basically looked at a map and was like, you're one city now, congrats.
Right. Talk about a recipe for some serious growing pains. And in the middle of all of this, enter Frederick the Great. Everyone gives him credit for the arts and sciences, turning Berlin into this cultural powerhouse.
Which, don't get me wrong, he deserves some credit, for sure. But let's not forget that Frederick, he was a little bit obsessed with military power, to say the least.
Oh, absolutely. And we're talking obsessed. I mean, think about it. Those beautiful grand boulevards that tourists love strolling down today, those weren't built for leisurely strolls. Frederick, he imagined them as avenues for military parades, you know, a way to show off Prussian might, intimidate the competition a little.
Yeah, our boy Frederick was a bit of a walking contradiction. Patron of the arts, but also all about that military precision.
It's true. And even his planning couldn't account for everything. Because, of course, then comes Napoleon, sweeping across Europe. And, well, Berlin is right in his path.
I mean, you can't talk about European history without Napoleon making an appearance, am I right?
It's practically a rule. But here's the thing I find fascinating. The Wikipedia article, it mentions Napoleon ordering his troops to be nice to the Berliners, at least, at first.
Really?
Yeah, can you imagine? These conquering soldiers told to, share meals, be friendly. I mean, it's Napoleon, the master strategist. Even he knew there's power in winning over the people, even if it's temporary.
It's honestly brilliant when you think about it. Avoid unnecessary resistance. Project an image of control and order. Of course, that facade.
Yeah, not exactly built to last. Nope. And as Napoleon's time in the sun starts to set, something new is on the horizon for Berlin. Something that's going to reshape not just the city, but the entire world. The 19th century kicks off, and with it, the Industrial Revolution hits Berlin like a runaway train.
The city changes almost overnight. You go from royal power to this smoky, bustling industrial center. The article, it actually uses this great phrase, describing the Cyclops chimneys spewing smoke into the sky.
Oh, wow.
It's a very vivid image, right? The symbol of progress, but also the changes, the upheaval that come along with it.
Totally. And progress, of course, always has a price tag. Berlin becomes, as the article puts it, Germany's answer to Manchester, which, let's be real, came with a whole host of new problems. Pollution, poverty, it's that classic story of the haves and the have-nots.
It reminds you that history isn't just this straight line of progress, right? Like, there are always these unintended consequences that come along for the ride.
Exactly. But it wasn't all bad news in Berlin. Even as these factories are popping up left and right, the city's busy building green spaces, like places for people to get a break from the grime and the chaos. That's when the Berlin Zoo opens, the oldest zoo in Germany. I mean, it really speaks to this human need to be connected to nature, even when you're living in the heart of an industrial revolution.
It's a cool juxtaposition when you think about it. On one hand, you've got this relentless drive for progress, and then on the other, this urge to create beauty, hold on to a little bit of wonder, and then boom, the roaring 20s. You know, that whole era everyone romanticizes, all the glamour, the excess. Berlin was no different.
Champagne, parties.
Exactly. But as the article kind of subtly points out, underneath all those champagne bubbles, beneath the jazz music, there were cracks, tensions, things bubbling just below the surface.
Waiting to erupt.
And erupt they did. There were political assassinations that rocked the city and the Nazi Party. While they weren't in power yet, they were starting to gain a foothold. That message, all that hate and division, it found fertile ground in a society that was, already kind of on edge, dealing with economic uncertainty, social change.
It's easy to forget that when you just focus on the glitz and glamour.
Totally. But it's a good reminder that even during those times that seem like carefree and fun, those seeds of unrest, they're often already being sown. And those seeds, unfortunately, they were about to bear some very bitter fruit.
And then, of course, we've got to talk about the really tough stuff. We can't talk about Berlin without talking about the Nazi era.
Yeah, it's a dark period, a dark chapter for the entire world, really, but especially for Berlin.
And the article doesn't shy away from it. But it does focus on the impact on the city itself, which I think is important.
Yeah, did you know that the Wannsee Conference, that's where the Nazis planned the Holocaust, it was held just minutes from the city center.
It's chilling, man. Just chilling. Like this beautiful city, this center of culture, becoming the, nerve center for one of the most horrific chapters in human history.
And then, as if that wasn't enough, the war ends. And Berlin, it's not just defeated, it's destroyed.
Broken.
Split in two.
Right. And yet, out of that devastation comes this incredible image of resilience. The Trumpfrauen.
Those women, man, clearing rubble with their bare hands.
It gets you right here, The strength of the human spirit, the refusal to just give up, even when surrounded by destruction. But of course, that's not where the story ends.
No, because then you get the physical division of the city, the
Mm-hmm.
Berlin Wall. It becomes this symbol, right? Like a physical manifestation of this whole ideological struggle that had the world in a chokehold.
And West Berlin, this little island in the middle of East Germany, it became this like showcase for the West, kept afloat by the Berlin airlift and tons of financial aid.
Talk about being caught in the middle.
Right. But it's important to remember it wasn't like a perfect utopia. Even in West Berlin, there were problems. The article talks about squatters, terrorism. Like, even with all that freedom, there was still this undercurrent of unrest.
It's almost like that saying, no matter where you go, there you are. There are going to be problems.
Exactly. But then, just as suddenly as it went up, the wall comes down. And this is the part I love. The article talks about how, like, the actual announcement totally botched.
Oh, yeah. Tell me more.
It was a miscommunication. No one meant to announce it when they did. There was no plan. It just kind of happened. And the people of Berlin, they just went for it. They started chipping away at that wall, tearing it down with their bare hands. I mean, come on. How can you not be inspired by that?
I know. It gives me chills every time I think about it.
Me too. It's one of the most iconic moments of the entire 20th century. This completely spontaneous eruption of joy. It just goes to show you how powerful that human desire for freedom, for unity really is. But, and this is important, the article doesn't sugarcoat things. Reunification. It wasn't all sunshine and roses.
Oh, no. Not at all. I mean, think about it. Years of being divided, separated. Of course there were going to be challenges.
Absolutely. The economic challenges were massive. The East, it still had and still has a long way to go to catch up. And those scars, the scars of division, those run deep.
It makes you think, doesn't it? About how even when the physical barriers come down, there's still so much work to be done to truly heal those divisions.
It's a process, a long, complicated process.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here today. We've seen Berlin transform from like literally an Ice Age valley to a divided city to what it is today, a thriving modern metropolis.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. Like, how many cities have lived that many different lives?
Right. So I guess the real question is, of all the Berlins that have existed, which one speaks to you? What part of this incredible story resonates? Food for thought, everybody.
Food for thought.
Thank you for listening. If you love history, don't forget to subscribe to History with Bree and Peter. Join us for more fascinating stories from the past. Hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode.